This is tape 2 of the Mr. Samuel Rosenzweig interview. You just finished telling me about that story about your brother beating up the 2 or 3 Poles. Can you describe for me the relationship between your parents and yourself?
Yeah, gladly. My parents. My father was always good to me. My mother, she was a very quiet person. Very, very quiet, very nice, always a good word. Never I heard a voice raised in our house. The love between my parents, I will never forget. At the older age where they were, as I remember at that time, around 60, the love was there like they would have been yesterday married. The respect. They used to sit down Saturday night sometimes, go and play cards, just without money, entertainment. They used to go on walks. To you, that may seem odd. I mention a walk. In our town, a man and woman didn't go for a walk, except the youth. But the religious ones, they didn't want to be seen walking with their wives. My father was a rebel in many ways. He walked with his wife every Saturday afternoon or in the evening. He had a very, very brighter outlook of what life should be all about, as far as I'm concerned. I wasn't a good son. I fought for my ways with my father a lot. For instance, before the war, once, I went swimming into a place where it was a lake, which used to be a quarry that was all of a sudden flooded. That was before my days, and there were no easy in or out, and there were, how do you call it, were dangerous places where the water was whirlpools. I must have been, that was shortly before the war, must be 38. I went there swimming, and somebody did the favor by running to my parents, saying that I'm swimming there. By the way, to swim I learned in the mikveh, if you know what a mikveh is. You push yourself from one end to the other. I didn't take any swimming lessons, but I managed to learn to swim. So I went to swim there, and of course my father sent one of my brothers to go and get me. It was far from home. By the time he came there, I wasn't there anymore, but I got my licking for it. It was quite an experience. I was a rebellious child. I wanted to learn. The problem was I wanted to learn the secular education. I wanted to go ahead in life to become something like most of the youth in my town. We were a rebellious youth. Our Zionist movement, our cultural desire for higher education, for better education, was very, very much on everybody's mind. But my father, let him rest in peace, wanted me to be religious, and I should go on and study. I rebelled in my strongest way I knew how, to show that I will not do that. Even so, that wasn't heard of in those days. Parents had more control over children than they have today. I did a lot of grief to my father, which I'm very sorry for it now. Unfortunately, would I've known that it will end the way it ended, losing them in such an early age of mine. Looking back, I probably would have acted differently. However, it came to a point where I almost wanted to run away from home. And I did run away for one night. I stayed at a bakery that they knew me, just to prove my point that I am not going to go on like this. I want to go to school. When I came home that day, I remember like today, I walked around not knowing what to do, but I actually walked around so that my brother can find me, because I wanted to go home. When I came home, my father sat down with me. I remember today like it would be now at the table, and he started crying. I hurt him very much. But we started talking. He started to talk to me, not like to a son that has to listen. He started to talk to me like to a person that knows what he wants. He didn't want us to come down to the city. It wasn't nice for my father, Eile Rosenzweig. A son should run away or should do things like this. We didn't hear of things like this at home. And we started to talk, and he realized then that I will not go on with just sitting and learning, or not only I want to go to school. And we talked and cried, and I remember like today he said, let's finish the year of school that you go to Cheder. And that was in 1939. I'm coming now to the war years, because it's not nice for this to come to the public open. And after that, next school year, I will send you to Krakow, to gymnasium, which nobody knew except me and my father, probably mother too, he told her. And from then on, we started to have a tremendous relationship. He used to go with me every night after I came home from Cheder for a walk on the Alea Henrika, which was a place where you would go to promenade, boys and girls, everything secular. You didn't, and there were cafe, home stores there, and there was like you go for, how do you say, you go for walks, boys and girls, and so you would walk on Bloor Street or Young Street,
Yorkville.
or Yorkville, right? And he talked with me. We talked about serious things, how one should live, how one should be, how one should dress. I promised my father I would, at those days, I would put tefillin every day, I will pray, I will be religious, but I don't want to continue learning. I want to have a secular education. And he taught me a lot. What I am today, and what helped me survive, is the relationship of my father and I. The last year and a half or two that I had the occasion to be with. I think I will finish here as far as pre-war my history, because there's no end. I could go on and on and on.
So tell me about what happened, or your first memory of the war or of the Nazis.
In 1936, we started to feel the pressure of the effects of what's going on more directly in Germany. Actually, that was after the death of Pilsudski. They came out, which I remember as a child, that there was a problem with kosher meat, with slaughter. There was, for instance, in my city, a Jewish boy like me couldn't go to gymnasium. If there was one that went, or two, they had to, I don't know, it was, as far as I'm concerned, you couldn't go there. I had to go to Krakow, like I said, to a Jewish gymnasium, which was out of town, in order for me to, with my father, to come up with some kind of arrangement that I do get higher education. So I don't know how to, I was too young or not involved to know exactly what went on. We felt the pressure. The Gentiles, the friends that I had in school, shortly before the war, you could see the openness of their disregard for us, not tolerance, trying to beat us up sometimes, go into fights, and so on. It was a tough time. However, this brought up till the years of when the war started in 1939. Shortly before this, a month earlier, we felt it in the air, something is coming. However, it was a town where people, the Jewish people, were comfortable. They had everything. It was a good lifestyle. And for a rich lifestyle in comparison to other parts of Poland.
Did you directly experience any of this anti-Semitism from the Poles, from the Gentiles?
Definitely so.
How so?
Like I said, the instance that I had, that I fought back once. We had neighbors. We had he wasn't an anti-Semite, but he was. He wouldn't say hello to us. I was a child. I walked by the store. I looked at the store. It was a beautiful store. Shara was his name. That was a rich Pole. He had a meat store. Beautiful store, very modern, very rich. He would not, I could never go in there or talk to them, or they would talk to me. There was no connection whatsoever. In the papers, I did not read much papers in those days, but you felt it all over. I felt it in my bones. It's not something that you have to see, you feel it. There was no connection between Gentiles and Jews, really, except doing business. However, I have to qualify this. There were some, of course, that were good. You can't say that every German or every Pole was bad. But generally speaking, that was the feeling, that was the atmosphere that we lived in. We were living in fear what's going to happen. We were so naive that in 1930, I have to mention another incident before the war. It's cloudy in my mind, but I think it's very important. That will give an example how the Jews felt secure in an insecure place. I think it was around 1935. My father, let him rest in peace, wanted to move to Israel. It's in cloud. I never heard it officially. I heard it as a child, like a child hears when parents talk or brothers and sisters talk. Remember, I was the youngest. I was looked like as a as a child. And I know that they were talking about going to Israel. My parents, my father wanted to go badly with the children. He didn't want to leave without the children because our children were always, our family was somehow, that was Europe, tight together. I don't remember which of the children, some didn't want to go because they were comfortable, they had a good lifestyle. My father went as far as sell the property, the house and everything, because you had to go as a rich immigrant to Israel at those days, to Palestine. Otherwise, you couldn't get a visa. He sold the house with the business on paper, like on a conditional offer, as you would call it, because he thought when all the children will see that that's what he did, they will know it's serious business. However, they didn't want to go and nothing came of it. I wish my father was wise. I wish they would have, if it's true, something is true in it. I don't know exactly how much of it is true. Something was there.
So, what happened when the war started?
When the war started in 1939, just shortly before we felt it, then all of a sudden, on the 1st of September, 1939, it was a Friday morning. This I do remember. I'm very bad with dates, but this sticks out. The war was out. We were only about 30 kilometers from the German border. The war broke out. There were refineries in Chebnya, which is a place 8 kilometers from our town, and they bombed those refineries. They were flying over. It was a very, very, of course we had prepared a shelter in one of the rooms. How foolish we were in the house. We thought that's going to save if a bomb would fall. But on the lower floors, we prepared a room with dark curtains and so on, to be prepared for the war. Nothing happened with this, but we had to run away. Everybody was afraid. All of a sudden, it was a panic. The army was deserting. You could see already the army falling apart, the Polish army. There was no resistance whatsoever at that point. It was tohu woh, how they call it in Hebrew and Yiddish. My parents, we had sisters, my mother had sisters in Krakow, 2 sisters. They decided that they should run away because the Jews were afraid, wealthy Jews, they were afraid, they wanted to run away from the Germans. Transportation was not available. We didn't have any cars and trucks in those days to that extent. There was a Hausewagen, and there were a few cars and autos. I remember that my father, mother, and I, there was a big tragedy that over the Sabbath they must have discussed it, that they're going to go to Krakow. So, all couldn't go together. So it had to cost a lot of money. There was some kind of a truck, open truck, that somebody had. You paid X dollars, X money, whichever currency. You had to pay to be able to go with them. And that was for Sunday morning arranged. So I supposed to have gone with my parents, and they will follow. The saying goodbye and crying was, and held back was so long taking in the house that parents didn't want to leave the kids and so on. They took in the meantime me with with 1 suitcase, a heavy suitcase, I don't know what's in there. Probably silver, I don't know, whatever we had there. They took me, so the brother took me to the truck, and the parents were still saying goodbye. It got so panicky there, and my parents still didn't come. And they say they're going to move. The truck was full already anyway. I wanted to get off. The people wouldn't let me get off. So I was stuck on the truck in 1939 at the age of 14, not quite, 14. And I'm going to Krakow. I did not remember the address of my aunt. I remember the street to describe. Now I remember the name. It was Miodova. I don't remember the number. But that time, I don't think I even remember the name of the street. The truck was held up. That trip took the whole day. They left probably around 10 o'clock. By the time I got to Krakow, it was 6 or 7, and it was getting already dark. And there the truck couldn't go to any place except on the outskirts there or a little bit into the city, and everybody had to get off. I get off, and I stand there with my suitcase, and I knew I cannot lose that. And how do I go? Where do I go? I didn't know where to go. Like from, I don't know, a guy walks by, and he says, "What are you sitting? What are you crying? Or what's with you?" So I told him, I know where I came here alone. My parents couldn't make it. And I want to go to my aunt. I knew how to describe where it is because that was close to a place where in Krakow, if anybody heard, there was a place where there was supposed to be a Jewish wedding, and it went into the Sabbath, and the whole thing got like into a volcano that sunk in, and that was very famous in Poland. So I told them, I know that's where my aunt lives, a block away from that and that place. And also there was the Remuz, as a great rabbi had there was a cemetery, and that's where it is. So he says, don't worry. He grabbed the suitcase, put it on his shoulder, and he walked with me. It was a long walk, I remember. And he took me, and then when I got closer, I could because I used to go every year, I mentioned with my father, to visit there. And he took me there. And I was very worried. I told him, what happened? I don't know where my parents are. I don't know. They came a day or two later because they couldn't get any other way, so they rented or whatever a horse and wagon. And with a horse and wagon, with a driver, I guess, the people that belonged to them, they came to Krakow.
When did you first notice the Nazis in Poland?
I first noticed them in Krakow, because when the Nazis came in, they came into Krakow. And I was already in Krakow, not in Chrzanów.
What happened? What did they do? What were the first things that you remember them doing?
Everybody was scared. In the beginning, when they came in, Jews were not coming out. It was also a Jewish area. But it was nothing. It was the army that you did not feel that much. It was the first army. And I can't say that we got so frightened. We didn't understand, realize the bestiality of what is going to happen. I guess none of us really did. So we took it for granted. It's a war. They're going to be bad. It's going to be, but it wasn't that bad. And for instance, they started to catch Jews, cut their beards, and
the army did this?
I don't know. Yes, the army too. The army too. There were some. There were abuse there was, but not to an extent that we should really feel it. Maybe I was too young to understand it. It was there, but not. It didn't affect me that much. I was young. I was running around and so on. When my parents came with my sisters, they must have come on Tuesday, I suppose. It was maybe the 4th or 3rd, and my sisters and my brothers. Around the 7th or 8th of September, we realized the Germans are here, the Germans are there, it's time to go home. How little did we know that we could have gone towards Russia or something. I cannot understand this, and I don't think there is an excuse for it or a criticism. We were just so confused. We were living close to the German border. Our culture knew the Germans. We thought it's a cultural, civilized people. And we couldn't think that anything as bad can happen. Even so, when you hear it, it's not when you see it. We figured it's going somehow to be all right. A war doesn't go on forever. That must have been the thinking, the logic.
At what point do you remember having to wear a yellow star or being identified as a Jew?
I will come to that. First, before I come to this, my brother, my three sisters, went back home. The first, like when I said this, so they went back home, and they were also traveling by whatever means there were. There was a tremendous tragedy 8 kilometers away from our town, which is Trzebinia, I said. There the Germans, whoever Jews that came by, that going back home, and that happens to be people from our town, because ours was a big town. They stripped them naked. They killed about 30 people, or 33 people, most of them. Some got away. My two sisters were among them. They were stripped naked, but the woman, they did not kill. They killed the man. That was the first that I directly heard and felt what is happening. Now I'm going back to Chrzanów when I was back in Chrzanów. After a while, yeah, it's also important. Before in Chrzanów, I think I mentioned that my sister already went when my brother-in-law came from Warsaw, and he left, so they went to Russia. We stayed, we went back home. When we came back home, we opened the store again. We felt there was also a killing of some Jewish boys right in the beginning, and there was killing of some of the intelligentsia from Poland. Also, the Germans did. That's what I remember that happened when I came back. And then we settled down into a more or less life that we had there. We opened the store. My parents, we looked after the store, and we started worrying what's going to be. They're starting to take people to work, take away goods from the stores, take away possessions. You had to bring the gold, you have to bring this, you have to bring this. This is a common story. What happened later is they started to worry, which is very ironic. How will I survive? Because they were all adults, mature, so they thought for them there's not a problem. But a young boy of 14, 15, they started to take to work, young people. How will I survive? In the meantime, there was organized a Jewish Judenrat, which they started to administer to the Jewish population in relationship with German authorities and Jews. They enrolled me into a course for electrician to learn.
Why don't we pause there and we'll pick it up on the next tape.
Okay. I go